What neither of them anticipated was that their conflict would become the catalyst for one of television's most consequential casting decisions. The producers of Cheers faced a genuine dilemma. They had a show that was ascending toward cultural phenomenon status. They had an ensemble cast that, despite internal friction, delivered performances that resonated with millions of viewers. But they also had two talented actors whose professional relationship was deteriorating in ways that threatened the show's harmony. Something had to give. According to head writer Ken Levine, the decision to make Frasier Crane a permanent series regular had nothing to do with punishing Shelley Long or favoring Kelsey Grammer in their dispute. Levine stated publicly that the writers recognized Grammer's extraordinary talent and his exceptional chemistry with the ensemble cast. The show was fighting for its ratings life, Levine argued, and they would never have kept a character they didn't genuinely believe added value. Frasier wasn't added to spite Long. He was added because he worked. But Grammer's interpretation of events was more cynical. In his memoir, he suggested that the producers, exhausted by Long's constant complaints and creative demands, made a petty decision to extend his initial 3-episode arc into a permanent role specifically to annoy her and push back against her overreach. From this perspective, Grammer's elevation wasn't about merit. It was about politics. It was about the producers taking sides in a conflict they were tired of managing. The discrepancy between these accounts matters because it speaks to larger truths about how creative environments function under stress. When talented people work under pressure, their interpretations of events become colored by emotion and self-preservation. What might have been a straightforward creative decision gets filtered through layers of frustration, ambition, and hurt feelings. Grammer heard, "We're keeping you to annoy Shelley." Levine heard, "We're keeping you because you're brilliant." Both versions contain kernels of truth, but neither is complete. What is undeniable is the outcome. Frasier Crane remained. His role expanded. His character developed into something far more complex and compelling than anyone initially imagined. And Shelley Long, watching this unfold, began to reassess her own position on the show. She had signed a 5-year contract. By season 5, that contract was nearly complete. And increasingly, Long was asking herself whether she wanted to renew it. The irony is profound. Long had fought to protect her character's territory, only to watch that territory transform in ways she couldn't control. Frasier wasn't going away. If anything, the character was becoming essential to the show's identity. Long could renew her contract and continue working alongside an actor whose presence she resented in a show that was slowly centering narratives she no longer controlled. Or she could walk away at the exact moment the show was reaching its cultural peak. In 1987, with the entire nation watching Cheers dominate the ratings and sweep awards, Long made her decision. She walked away. Her departure shocked producers, disappointed audiences, and created a narrative vacuum that would reshape the show's entire final 6 seasons. What Long didn't anticipate was that her departure would ultimately validate Grammer's position on the show. With her gone, he would become the show's most valuable player in ways that vindicated every fight they'd had. The conflict that nearly tore the show apart had, paradoxically, strengthened it. Years passed. The entertainment industry moved on. Cheers concluded its run in 1993 with a series finale that drew 93 million viewers, cementing its place in television history. Kelsey Grammer's Frasier Crane proved so popular that he launched into his own spin-off series, which would run for 11 seasons and become equally iconic. Shelley Long pursued her film career with mixed results, appearing in notable projects but never quite achieving the cinematic stardom she had sought. The two actors' paths diverged significantly after Cheers ended. They occasionally crossed paths at industry events, but they rarely spoke. Grammer didn't reach out. Long didn't reach out. The professional relationship that had defined their work on the show simply ceased to exist. It was replaced by a polite distance, the kind of civility you extend to someone you used to know but no longer consider part of your life. But the resentment lingered beneath that civility. Grammer, in interviews and in his published writing, continued to characterize Long as difficult, demanding, and ultimately threatened by his success. He painted a picture of an actress so insecure in her own talent that she had tried to sabotage a co-star. He positioned himself as the victim of her jealousy, the young performer who simply tried to do his job while facing constant undermining from someone in a position of power. Long, for her part, largely remained silent on the details. When pressed about their relationship in interviews, she would acknowledge tension but refuse to elaborate. She corrected the most egregious mischaracterizations of her behavior, but she didn't engage in a public back and forth with Grammer. She seemed content to let history judge the situation without her active participation in its revision. Then, in a surprising turn, Grammer extended an unexpected olive branch. He invited Long to guest star on his hit spin-off series Frasier. The episode, titled The Show Where Diane Comes Back, brought the character of Diane Chambers back into Frasier's world after years of absence. It was a narrative reunion that paralleled a personal one. Long accepted the invitation. The two actors worked together again, this time as professionals who had moved past their conflict. Grammer later pointed to that guest appearance as the moment they genuinely made peace. He told the press that the collaborative week reminded them both of why their chemistry had been so electric in the first place. It allowed them to let go of the past and demonstrate that no hard feelings remained. The episode was critically acclaimed, and both actors delivered performances that suggested a real reconciliation had taken place. But reconciliation is a complicated thing. It doesn't erase history. It doesn't make the past hurt any less. It simply creates space for people to move forward without carrying that hurt into their future interactions. Long and Grammer could work together again. They could acknowledge their shared history. But the years of silence couldn't simply be undone through a single guest appearance, no matter how meaningful that appearance was. What happened between Kelsey Grammer and Shelley Long wasn't unusual in the entertainment industry. Talented people clash. Egos collide. Conflicts emerge that feel insurmountable in the moment. But what made their particular conflict worth examining was what it revealed about the pressure cooker that Cheers had become. For 11 seasons, Cheers was the bar where everybody knew your name. It was comfort television before anyone used that phrase, a half-hour escape into familiar laughter, clinking glasses, and the comforting rhythm of faces that felt like family. Millions of viewers welcomed Sam, Diane, Carla, Norm, and Cliff into their living rooms every week. The chemistry felt effortless. The banter felt natural. The camaraderie seemed real. But what audiences saw on screen was only half the story. Behind the warm lighting and perfectly timed punchlines, another drama was unfolding. It didn't play out in front of the studio audience. It wasn't written into the scripts. And for years, the cast rarely spoke about it publicly. Tension simmered beneath the surface, fueled not by a single explosive fight but by something slower, more complicated, and far more personal. According to Kelsey Grammer, one co-star's behavior created an atmosphere that left much of the cast frustrated, exhausted, and at times deeply resentful. The irony is impossible to ignore. Cheers was built on the illusion of belonging. The entire premise revolved around acceptance, familiarity, and the idea that no matter how chaotic life became, there was always a place where you were understood. Yet behind the cameras, that sense of ease was often replaced by strain. Long rehearsal nights stretched even longer. Script read-throughs became battlegrounds. And creative differences blurred into personal grievances. Kelsey Grammer joined the series in its third season as Dr. Frasier Crane, a character initially intended for a brief arc. No one expected him to become one of the show's most enduring figures. But as his presence grew, so did an undercurrent of conflict that would shadow the production for years. In later interviews and in his memoir, Grammer hinted that not everyone welcomed the shift in dynamics. In fact, he suggested that one particular co-star saw his arrival not as an opportunity, but as a threat. At first, the friction was subtle. It appeared in notes during rehearsals. It surfaced in private conversations with writers. It lingered in the pauses between takes. To the audience, nothing seemed amiss. The laughter remained loud. The ratings steadily climbed. But inside Stage 25, frustrations quietly accumulated. Grammer would eventually reveal why so many on set struggled with this co-star and why, for a long time, he did too. The question isn't simply who was disliked. The deeper question is why. And the answer, according to Grammer, says as much about the pressures of success as it does about personality. To understand the conflict, you have to first understand the fragile ecosystem that Cheers had become by season 3. The show had survived what should have been a death sentence. When it premiered on NBC in September 1982, it ranked 74th out of 77 monitored programs. The ratings were catastrophic. Network executives were ready to pull the plug. But Brandon Tartikoff, NBC's president, made a controversial decision to keep the show alive, betting on quality over ratings. That decision paid off in ways no one anticipated. By season 2, Cheers had found its footing. By season 3, it was becoming a phenomenon. But success brought new pressures. The cast and crew were no longer fighting for survival. They were fighting to maintain excellence while the spotlight grew brighter and the stakes grew higher. Every episode mattered. Every performance counted. The weight of that responsibility changed people. Ted Danson, who played Sam Malone, felt that weight most acutely. He was the lead. He was the face of the show. From the first episode, he understood that his performance set the tone for everyone else. When things worked, he got partial credit. When things fell apart, the blame inevitably landed on his shoulders. By season 3, Danson had already invested years into the show's success. He had fought through early cancellation rumors. He had helped build something meaningful from ruins. When Kelsey Grammer arrived on set, Danson saw opportunity. Grammer was talented, undeniably so. His comedic timing was sharp. His character, Frasier Crane, brought intellectual wit that complemented the show's ensemble dynamic. But what Danson didn't fully appreciate at first was how his arrival would shift the internal politics of the production. Shelley Long played Diane Chambers, the show's romantic lead and intellectual counterpoint to Sam Malone. Her chemistry with Danson had been central to Cheers' early appeal. Their will they won't they dynamic drove seasons 1 and 2. Audiences invested in their relationship. Writers built entire storylines around the tension between them. And Long had positioned herself as the show's sole voice of sophistication, the educated foil to the blue-collar patrons. Then Frasier Crane walked into the bar, and suddenly there were two intellectual voices instead of one. Grammer's character brought Ivy League credentials and psychiatric expertise. He spoke the same language as Diane, but with an added layer of pretension and self-awareness that made him instantly compelling. Writers began giving Frasier some of the best lines. The audience loved him. And Long began to feel something she hadn't anticipated, threatened. This wasn't simple jealousy, though jealousy certainly played a role. It was about narrative ownership. Long believed she had carved out a specific space in the show's ecosystem. Frasier's presence didn't just expand that space. It fundamentally changed what it meant. Where once Diane had been uniquely refined, she was now one of two refined characters. The distinction mattered to Long in ways that went beyond ego. What happened next revealed something uncomfortable about the nature of creative collaboration under pressure. Long didn't simply accept the shift in dynamics. Instead, she began what Grammer would later describe as a relentless behind-the-scenes campaign to protect her territory. According to Grammer's account in his autobiography, Long frequently approached the show's head writers with complaints. She insisted that jokes and punchlines being given to Frasier rightfully belonged to Diane. She argued that his presence was cannibalizing her character's purpose. She made it clear, repeatedly and directly, that she believed Grammer was stealing her material. Grammer wasn't passive in the face of this pressure. He was young, ambitious, and increasingly confident in his abilities. He could feel the friction, but he also knew that audiences responded to his character. The studio audiences laughed hardest at his lines. The writers were clearly excited about where they could take Frasier. He wasn't about to diminish his own performance to make room for someone else's comfort. What started as professional disagreement began to feel personal. The script read-throughs, which should have been collaborative exercises, became tense affairs. Long would note changes she wanted made. Grammer would defend his scenes. Danson, caught in the middle as the show's de facto leader, felt the weight of managing personalities while trying to maintain production schedules. The exhaustion from long shooting nights sessions that frequently stretched past midnight because writers insisted on real-time script revisions based on audience reactions made everyone raw. Tempers that might have stayed civil under normal circumstances frayed quickly. Behind the scenes, the tension manifested in ways both obvious and subtle. Grammer claims that Long mounted what amounted to a coordinated effort to have him removed from the show entirely. She wanted his role reduced. She wanted his scenes cut. She wanted the writers to shift focus back to her character exclusively. From Grammer's perspective, Long wasn't defending her character's integrity. She was trying to eliminate competition. Shelley Long's version of events, when she eventually addressed them publicly, told a different story. She acknowledged that she had offered constructive professional character input regarding how the show's intellectual dynamic was evolving. But she flatly denied that she was trying to sabotage Grammer or get him fired. She maintained that her concerns were legitimate artistic questions about character balance and narrative purpose. The fact that Grammer had interpreted professional feedback as personal malice, she suggested, said more about his own insecurities than her intentions. The truth, as is often the case, likely existed somewhere between these two accounts. Long probably did express genuine concerns about the show's direction. Grammer probably did feel those concerns as attacks. Both were talented, ambitious people operating under intense pressure, trying to protect their interests in a production that was rapidly becoming one of television's biggest hits. Neither was entirely right or entirely wrong. But the collision between them would ultimately help determine the show's trajectory in unexpected ways.